First of all, welcome to this program. We have the privilege, the pleasure to have Maria Ressa with us today.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for being here. You are a press freedom defender, a feminist icon. You are a UNESCO Guillermo Cano Prize laureate. You are a Nobel Prize laureate. It's a great pleasure to have you here. So thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me. That just means I'm old, you know.
UNESCO is convening a global dialogue
Yes.
to discuss principles for the regulations of internet platform.
About time.
What do you think about this, and why did you came here, and what is the message you want to share?
It is time to do this because what is happening globally is that freedom of speech is being used to stifle freedom of speech. And UNESCO is uniquely placed to actually define that because its mandate is about protecting freedom of expression and safety for journalists. Both are under extreme attack. First, through principles, the business principles, something that we didn't even have a name for till 2019, surveillance capitalism, the business principles of tech companies. And then the second thing is, it's like learning a new language. The world has been turned upside down. The principles have been turned upside down. And there's no better place than UNESCO to go back. What are the principles, the values of human rights? What are the values of democracy that we need to protect?
But explain a bit, because indeed when people talk about regulations, principles, we see a lot of concerns that this might infringe upon the fundamental freedom of speech, fundamental press freedom. How can we make sure that any regulations that come in place will not break this precious fundamental right to just say what we want to say?
That fear is what tech lobby firms have exploited. And as of like a year ago, you're talking about $70 million in the United States. That fear has allowed the weaponization of technology, of social media, and the first people under attack are journalists and news organizations. It has eroded facts. I mean, these three sentences I say over and over. I've said it in the Nobel lecture. You know, essentially by design, these technology companies prioritize the spread of lies over hate. That's the fundamental failure, right? Imagine if you, prioritize the spread of lies over facts. So imagine if you tell your child, lie, I will reward you. And then you keep saying lie all the time and I will keep rewarding you. That is the fundamental principle in design of these tech companies. Why? Because when you're scrolling, when it is a fight for your attention, what keeps you galvanized on the platform is fear, anger, hate. Essentially, these platforms using a principle called A/B testing has hacked our biology, manipulating our emotions to keep us scrolling. And by doing that, what started as an advertising and marketing tool has become a weapon of dictators. And I know this firsthand. You know, I lived in 2016 through the weaponization of social media. You say a lie a million times, it becomes a fact. And then a year later, top down, the weaponization of the law. I can still go to jail for decades, but as of 2018, I faced almost a century in jail just for doing my job. Women journalists, women politicians, women researchers who are trying to tell people how they are being insidiously manipulated are being attacked. And the goal is not to actually make you listen or to engage you in dialogue. The goal is to pound you to silence. This is a UNESCO report, a big data case study. In my case, they went over almost 500,000 social media attacks. In 2016, I was getting an average of 90 hate messages per hour. Imagine if you were getting 90 hate messages per hour. And I'll show some of them today. But the goal of that was to pound me to silence. UNESCO and ICFJ, who did the study, they showed that 60% of the attacks were meant to tear down my credibility, to make everyone else believe that I am lying, right? So it's gaslighting. And then the other 40% meant to tear down my spirit. The reason we could stand up against it was because we looked at the data. We analyzed the data. But the people who did the report, Julie Passetti, ICFJ, UNESCO, said that of the number of women journalists they interviewed, and you should check with her, but that everyone cried except me. And the only reason I didn't is because I know this is meant to stop me from doing my job. UNESCO has been an incredible supporter of journalists and of Rappler and of me through the years. I came in, for 3 years, I was one of the judges for the Guillermo Cano World Press Freedom Prize, right? And then the world turned. And I go back to that fundamental principle of tech companies, which is reward the lies. Because if you reward the lies, the incentive structure of the entire world is upside down. Is it any wonder that if you don't have integrity of facts, you cannot have integrity of elections, right?
You've been extremely vocal about indeed this
Too
shift.
much.
No,
Probably.
no, about this shift and the change for tech companies taking the role that was before that of journalists as gatekeepers.
Right.
Can you explain a bit more what you mean by that?
And this goes with your first question, is will this stifle freedom of speech? There were always gatekeepers, always. The difference with journalists is we had evolved a set of standards and ethics that were transparent to everyone. You could check it, right? The goal now that we should be doing is that we should be taking data from these tech companies and making it easy for academics, for journalists, for the public to actually see what the tech companies are doing so that we can see that they're incentivizing the worst of human nature. And this is what we see in our study. It is evidence-based. It's something I've lived through. I think in a strange way, it was both a blessing and a curse to be attacked because I ran the largest news organization in the Philippines, so I understand what old power was like. I run our business. I know that these new advertising, micro-targeting, is not like the old advertising. I know how the tech is a multiplier of both good and evil. And then finally, when you're the target of attacks, you're the only one that sees all the attacks. And that again is by design. So coming to this in an evidence-based way makes you understand that the old arguments of freedom of speech, Justice Brandeis, the only way to fight hate speech is with more speech, in the age of exponential lies, loses meaning because information warfare, and this is where geopolitical power comes in and exploits the weaknesses of what was once an advertising marketing tool because it insidiously manipulates us. It pounds open identity fracture lines. It essentially walks into democracies and comes in at the cellular level and tears it apart. This is the world we live in today.
But then I have a final question for you because the landscape you describe is so difficult, so challenging. Do you still believe in the possibility of argumentative speech, of reasoned dialogue? Because indeed, that was one of the principles of democracy.
Not possible in today's information ecosystem until you stop the impunity. We know genocide happened in Myanmar. The UN sent people there. Meta, Facebook sent people there. They all said that this platform enabled genocide, right? And yet, no one has been held accountable. I wrote a book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. It was Rodrigo Duterte, the president of the Philippines, and his brutal drug war, but it was much more Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. Because talk about a global dictator, right? I've been at the receiving end of this. I know what it's like to get pounded with exponential lies. It attacks you at the core of your insecurities, and you must come out of it. The biggest problem we face now is that I think gendered disinformation, again, another UNESCO study, gendered disinformation is going to take women out of the public space because no one wants to have to deal with these types of attacks. So why are democratic nations allowing it? Why is UNESCO allowing it? This is impunity that must stop. The same way that we have building codes, and we know this building is not going to fall down around us. as consumers, as citizens of a democracy, we demand better.
Thank you very much, Maria
No,
Ressa.
thank you. You guys should demand better.